Hello, my name is Claudio Kish, student number 1317978, and in this video I will present my XML-RPC implementation for the second referral assignment. In this assignment we were asked to implement the XML-RPC architecture in a server-client environment using the recycling machine from the main GUI, and what I had to do is users from the recycling machine have can log in and can also leave a review of their experience with the machine. So the way this works is I created this server GUI which has two JText areas which we will fill up with information. For example, when the user wants to use a machine, I've disabled all the buttons. This is the normal recycling machine, which I added in a separate panel, and I added a new panel called authentication, just so I could add this button. So what it does is, when I want to insert a name, this window will pop up and it'll say, please enter your name. So for example, I'll put my name, okay? And as soon as that happens, the information is given to the recycling machine server. So the user is passed down the machine IP, the machine name is passed down, and also the machine date and time. So the date and the time at which the operation happened. Um, Next, I'll have the user reviews. So the way the user review works is I'll just use the recycling machine for a second, for example. Okay, I'll add 3 items, and when I print the receipt, we can still see the receipt right here, but a new GUI pops up called review. And this GUI, the user has the option of selecting a grade, which he can give the recycling machine. For example, I'll give it a 4, and then it can pass down a message. For example, the recycling machine was easy to use. Once it does that, that message will be sent to the recycling machine server, and again the machine IP, the grade that was given, the date and time at which it was given, and the review given. So what we can see here is, you can see the recycling machine was easy to use. Now every time a new user will come, the recycling machine cannot be used anymore. So if a new user wants to use the machine, he will basically have to press and enter their name. For example, I'll use Andre as a name. Again, the same thing happens. The user is passed down the IP, the machine name, and the date. And once the user uses the machine, for example, 1 paper bag, print the receipt, he will be given this grade. This GUI, which he can say, for example, 2. I want more items to add, for example. Okay, now I'll show how I made this. So first I will start with the server, and then I'll move to the client. In the server, I created 4 classes called active users, RM server GUI, and user messages. And I'll start with active users and user messages. These 2 classes have been created so I can initialize a new user, for example, when it's added, or the new user message, and so I can create the vectors out of them. And this is because they already have the strings necessary to hold every bit of information every time the methods that fill them up will be used. Now I will move over to the GUI. So to make the GUI, it was pretty easy. Basically what I had to do is make a main panel, which we can see here, called main panel. I will show this in a sec. Have 2 JText areas called text messages and text users, and put them in scrolling pane, so if the text is ever too long, you can scroll through it and you can see the full message. And then gave it a title, set size, added everything to the main panel. For example, the main panel, we initialize it here as a new J panel. We give it the borders, everything. Then we add the header label. We add the JText area text messages, and then we create the scrolling area, which will contain the text message, and then we add the scrolling area to the main panel. So the text messages JText area is contained within the scrolling area, which is a JScroll pane. The same thing happens for the user's text. Then we have added two more labels, which you can see here. A user log and the user review. So the person that's using the server knows what these informations are. And finally, we reach the main method. So here in the main method, we initialize a new server GUI, a new GUI called myGUI, and set this to visible. And after that, we initialize the server. So we use the variable type web server, which was given to us by importing this Apache XML-RPC web server. In order to import this, we had to add the chis69mc jar, so it can import this. Otherwise, it would give an error, since Apache cannot be imported anymore normally. Okay, so we create a new web server called server that starts listening on port 80. Port 80, I use port 80 because the normal World Wide Web port, and it's normally open. I created a new RMS, which RMS is my RM server. Is just a class that contains all the methods which will interact, will interact with the server. So the way this works is I create the server. We add a handler to this server called the Recycaling server, and then tell it where to pass the parameters. So an RMS. And then we start this server. So what the server actually does, it will start listening on port 80 for commands coming towards it, and which have the recycling server as their handler and pass the parameters as vectors. I also added a print line that will just say that the server started successfully, and it's between try catch blocks. In case it fails, again, I will catch the exception and see what happens. I have also created two print methods called print1 and print2, and what it does, they basically append they add the text with append that is passed down to them through the string to text messages and text users. So they basically fill up the two JText areas. Now, in order to use these, we'll go to the RM server. So here is where I put all the methods that the server uses. I created two new vectors from active users and user messages called vActive users and vUser messages. I also created the session cookie and set it so it's not set. Now, when the construction method of this class initializes the vector active users and messages. And now I will go through the methods. First, I will start with getUser. So what this method does is it asks for 4 strings, which is the name, IP, machine name, and the date, and initializes a new active users called users, and then it adds all of everything to the users. So, example, the user gets the username name, which is passed down. The user's machine IP gets the value of IP, and so on. Now, this users that has been created will be added to the vector vActive users. This vector will contain all of the users that have connected to the machine, and each of these users has the machine IP, machine name, and date within them. Now, what it does, because this is the first action the user will make with the client, is to input their name. I'll create a new session cookie, I set it, and then I return the session cookie to the client. And at the end, when this finishes, it will fire the print user log, which what print user log does, just creates the string to print to the server, which basically is creates a holder, an empty holder, uses the vActive users vector with a for for loop, what it does is goes through the whole vector, the length of the vector, and for every record in that vector, it will stop. It will give the holder, for example, uh, initializes the active users as A users to get them from this vector, and initialize and that those active users get each of the records that the server is in. For example, if I'm on the first record, the 0 record, it will get all of the information from that record, and as it goes past, it will get all the information from the full vector. So what it does then, it just creates a formatted string that uses just says that the user and the username will be put here from using the A users I've created to get the values out of the vector. Then it will give the username, a user machine IP, a machine name, and date and time right here. All of these values which have been passed from the client. And at the end, it just fires the print2 method I made in the GUI just to get the string that was created to the JText area. Again, the second important method that we have right here is the getMessage method. Again, this getMessage has 4 strings that need to be given from the client to the server: the message, the grade, machine IP, and the date. Just as before, we initialize a new user messages called message, and we add every one of the values that was given to us in this message. For example, the user message, the user grade, IP, and date. And then we add this element to the user messages vector. So again, the user messages will contain every value given from the clients, not only one client, from every client. Because when the user gives the review is basically the last thing he will do with the recycling machine, here's where I unset the cookie. So the session cookie will get the value of not set, and this will also fire the print message log, which print message log does the same thing. It goes through the vector and using the holder, which is empty, the string holder, it makes the string that gives the message. So a string format, again, the machine IP, it takes the A message, which is what I initialized here as a new user message, to get each one of the records, and it will just create the string again, and finally in the end it will use print to print the message to the GUI. Next, I will move over to the client. In the recycling GUI, I will show the changes that have been added to the client. I used the same client from the same recycling machine from the first assignment, and just enhanced it a bit so it can connect to the server. So what I did, firstly, I added a new button called beacon, and the message for this button is please insert your name. I also added 2 new JPanels called identify user and recycle panel. The reason why I did this is so when I made the initial recycling machine, every element that was in the recycling machine is right now in recycle panel, and the new element that I added, which is the new button, is in identify user. Again, I've set borders and everything to make it look a little bit nicer. Also giving them the name to the panels. I added every button, then added listeners to this panel, including the new button, which we can see here again in the control class, and it uses the same methods as before, with the exception of the tuning methods I've added here, which are show recycling machine and hide recycling machine. Well, hide our machine, and this is pretty simple. It gets every one of the elements from the recycling machine, and if the user will input their name, I will use this method to set the identify user panel and the beacon panel to false while enabling all the other buttons. And hide our machine does the complete opposite. When the user will press the receipt, all of the buttons will be disabled except for the connect to the server. I mean, for the input name one. Now, I will show what happens when the user clicks on the beacon button, which the action again is handled in my controller. So again, when let's say it's the same controller, just that now has the session cookie, and I also had to import the Xmlrpc client in order to connect to the server. So what I do right now, again, every button that is added, that is pressed, it gives the My Customer panel the number of the item that was pressed. And when beacon is selected, so just so I show it, 1 second. So, okay. So when this button is selected, what it'll do, it'll initialize a new Xmlrpc client called server. And then this is between try and catch blocks. So if any error occurs connecting to the server, I will have an error in the console. The exception will be printed in the console. So what it does is initializes the new server as an Xmlrpc client while telling it the location of the server I'm trying to connect to. Because it's on the same computer, I could have used localhost, but I tried to put it on different machines and see if it works. And my laptop was the server, so this is the IP of my laptop right now. We'll tell it the IP, the port where the server is listening to. After that, what I did is I created a new string called name, which will hold the name of the user, and it will use a G option pane, the input dialog pane, with the text of please enter your name to get the name of the user, which will be stored in this name variable. After that, I just create a vector called parameters, initialize it, and I add every one of the values that I want to give the server to this parameter, because the only way of transferring data with Xmlrpc, the parameters have to be a vector. We'll show this a bit later. So the parameters, we add the name of the parameter. Then I want to add the machine's IP, which to get this, I use this, the inet get localhost, get host address, which will give me the IP of the machine. And again, I use the add element init get localhost, get host name, which will give me the name of this machine. In this case, the name of my laptop. And the final parameter that I added is the get current timestamp, which is a method I created down here. It's pretty simple. I created the date format as SDF date. Now I get the date a variable as now, which gives me the date, and then I create a new string called string date, which is made using the format and the date of right now, and it'll return the date. So when this is called over here, it'll return the date at which this happens. And then in order to pass these parameters to the server, I use server.execute. It will use the server's handler, which has been set up in the server GUI, which we can see here. This is the server handler, and then it will pass the parameter. It will use the server handler and the method which I want to pass the parameters to. This almost looks like a local method invocation, but it can be used over a network. So it's just basically saying the class where it's at and the method, but in this case we use a handler and the method. So because in my server I told it that all of the methods will be run here, it knows that get message is in the RM server. Now 1 second. Okay, now what it does is it uses get users and passes the parameter, the vector with the parameters to that function that I've shown earlier. So if we do go here, we can see that get user. 1 second. No, sorry. Here. So we can see that the get user will get the name, IP, machine name, and the date. And when it does, it'll just print them out to the gtext area. So this is basically what it does. And if I remember correctly, yeah, when the get user is done, this method will return the session cookie. So what it does is, in the controller, I have the variable called mySessionCookie, and this variable gets the value of result to string. Now, every time a method passes down something back to the client from Xmlrpc, that will be an object variable. It will always be an object variable. So the first thing I had to do was get that object to string, so that's why I use the command toString. And finally, I just have another method here, getCookie, which just returns the cookie. And finally, after the user uses the recycling machine and does click print receipt, it will launch this button. So when the click receipt button is fired, in the recycling GUI, I execute hide our machine. So I will hide all of the buttons for the recycling machine and only enable the button to put your name in. And after that, it will it will make a new review GUI and set it to visible. Now this is the thing that this is the only class that I've added to the recycling machine, and it's a new GUI that I made. Basically looks like this. One second. Okay, so what it does is it gets the grade and the text message and then passes them down. So the way it does this, has a gtext area for the text, button for the confirm, okay, and then the main panel and the combo box, which allows you to select from the list of 1 to 5. So again, initializes a new GUI, sets all the panels up. It gives it the height. It gives it the height and the width, and then it adds the J label. And here is where I have the choices for the combo box. So I wanted to give it a grade from 1 to 5. So we have 1 for each of the grades to 5. We add this string choices to the combo box using initializing the combo box and then adding choices to this combo box, and then we just add the combo box to the main panel. In the main method, we can see that it sets up as a new myGUI and sets it to visible. And well, because we only have one button here, which is the confirm button. And 1 second, we can see it here. The confirm button is added to the main panel, and the action listener is set to this. So the action, when the button is pressed, I will get the action here and the action performed, which is in the same class. And again, it uses the Xmlrpc client called server to connect to the server. I had to import the Xmlrpc client in this separate GUI to work, and then it gets the message that the user entered from the gtext area with get message, and the grade which the user entered with value of combo get the selected item. This is how we get a value out of the combo box, and then it converts it to a string. So it's surely a string. After I have these two, I create the vector again called parameters, add the message, grade, the IP, and then I use the get current timestamp method from controller to add the time again. And then I use server execute the server handler plus the method I want to use, which this time is get message. As we've seen earlier, get message needs 4 parameters, which is the message, the grade, IP, and the timestamp. And once this is done, it will use this .dispose. So once the review happens, this window will close. And again, it will give the server location right here. And this has been my Xmlrpc implementation. All the tasks that were given have been completed.